You're going to blame somebody for sending Canadians to the polls. That's why everybody's uttering the words Christmas election. They're using it as a boogeyman.
All the talk is about an election. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got this election talk coming from all sides, CBC, CTV. What will the parties do? We've got Fred Delory who said this is going to happen. There's an election coming. Some people not so certain. I'm not so certain. I think the NDP will support the Liberals, but it is an awful time for the NDP to go to an election. But let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got some polling data coming out of Hamilton, this NDP stronghold Hamilton. Look at this, Conservatives 46% to 40% NDP. So things are changing here in Canada. So we're seeing a bunch of news come out of America. I mean, look at these numbers here. This is what Canadians think of America.
And Canadians who say America is an enemy or potential threat, look in 2023, it was 7%. Look how high it's gone now. We're talking about 48%. We're talking about a nearly 48-point jump. And the Trump administration, my dear friends, has a net popularity rating in Canada of minus, get this, 58 points. Canadians who say America is...
Wow. Are all these tariffs worth it is the question now. This relationship here is definitely bruised. But what we know from the Canadian people is once you change out the leader, everything changes. We saw it with Justin Trudeau. He disappeared. Boom. The polling numbers exploded right up there when Mark Carney stepped in. And, you know, even if it was Christy Clark or someone else who stepped in for the Liberals, the numbers would have gone back up. People are done with Captain Schmuck. They're just sick of the pompous, smug snowboard instructor running Canada. So once Donald Trump goes out the door, I don't think you're going to see these same numbers. Clearly, all the Liberals hate Donald Trump right now, and a lot of Canadians not a fan of Donald Trump. But once he's done, say if J.D. Vance was running the country or someone else, you wouldn't see these same numbers. This 48 would drop to 20 or 16 or whatever the number may be, maybe back down to 7%. Granted, all the tariffs are lifted. We're also seeing this here. The Senate just voted 50 to 46 to overturn Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. That means 4 Republicans voted with the Democrats to overturn this. That's Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lindsay Murkowski, and Rand Paul.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 46. The joint resolution is passed.
Wow. So I'm not sure what that means for Donald Trump's tariffs there, at least the tariffs that aren't part of the 323 tariffs like auto tariffs, but the other ones. The House is expected to reject the resolution. Even if it passed, Trump would veto it, so the tariffs stay in place for now. But what this vote really does is put the Senate on record that formal opposition can carry weight in the Supreme Court, which is reviewing whether the president can use emergency powers under IEEPA to impose tariffs without Congress. So this is a big rabbit hole here. We're not going down this here today, but this will be settled in the court. Meanwhile, though, in South Korea, look at this, rolling out the red carpet for Donald Trump. These Asian countries know how to get a deal. They know how to praise the other leaders, have a good impression, and get deals. So Trump's right here. They're playing this music. This isn't out of the speakers. There's a band over here. Meanwhile, in Japan, their new prime minister is going to be giving them 250 cherry blossom trees and a fireworks display next July 4th.
Trump was treated like a king, even though he's not. The Japanese lit up skyscrapers with red, white, and blue, and then surprised him with big, beautiful gifts.
We will extend a gift of 250 cherry trees to Washington, D.C. In addition, I understand that fireworks from Japan, from Akita Prefecture, will be shown in Washington, D.C. on July 4th next year.
Cherry trees and 4th of July fireworks. Now we're talking. The president felt right at home. Before talking shop, the new prime minister said, "Mr. President, want to watch the World Series?" Trump said, "I thought you'd never ask." And she was rooting for the right team. Japan loved.
This is crazy. They watch the World Series. They end up showing up to their meeting late because they're watching the World Series and having a laugh about this. They're building a relationship here very quickly. Sign some hats here. Japan is doing it right. South Korea is doing it right. Mark Carney not doing it right. And meanwhile, what do we have back home? We've got Melanie Joly with this.
It's very silent. Is everybody awake? Very good. I've seen you in other venues. I know how you can be. Ça me fait plaisir.
Yeah, okay. And if it isn't Melanie Joly, then we've got more national anthems being butchered during the Jays game, this time by Rufus Wainwright.
That only us come.
At least he didn't change the words earlier of on native land, but he did change that. This has to end. These singers can't change lyrics, otherwise they shouldn't be able to sing. They should be fined for this. No, seriously, who's hiring these people? Jumping over to CBC, talking election here. There's some interesting points made here.
I was talking to some people today about where things are. The Conservatives, there's no way the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives, with a leadership review coming up in January, are going to vote for a Mark Carney budget or even abstain for a Mark Carney budget. When you can vote
People could be away.
But when you can vote by phone from anywhere, it's tough to justify it for that particular party. The Bloc has its 18 demands, 6 core demands on the table, which are expensive and difficult to meet. So the NDP, this is my question. Don Davies was here last night and said he wants to see the budget, but he's an interim leader. And there's leadership ambitions and directional disagreements inside the caucus of 7. I mean, I've also heard the NDP are kind of sick of being seen as the people who always save the Liberals. And I think it's someone else's turn. I mean, how do you see the potential math here on this one?
Well, look, I mean, I think the NDP, and Don said this last night when he was here, have been pretty clear. They are in favor broadly of investments that are going to help with jobs, with housing, with healthcare, with a lot of the priorities that they've laid out. They do not like austerity, as this government has unfortunately framed the budget up to be. And so that's sort of their parameters. And I think that waiting to see what's actually in the budget is a move to be recommended to all parties, actually.
Yes.
The government, I think, is fairly clear on what types of things would garner New Democrats support. But I think the bar politically is high because they have unfortunately framed this budget up as one that is going to involve sacrifice, cuts, austerity, call it what you will. And they've been unable so far to tell a really compelling story about the investments and the way those are going to benefit Canadians directly right now. So that has also put the NDP in a difficult position, I would say.
I wonder, though,
I mean, typically the government would be negotiating with other parties right now, but Mark Carney and the Liberals are not doing that. So something's very funny here. The NDP have no idea what's in there. Neither does the Bloc or the Conservatives. There's no negotiating. There's no real push to try to get this to pass. So almost like the Liberals want this to fail and go to an election.
So Priya, when you look at, like, the government's going to argue for its agenda, but when you look at what Trump has done, you look at the job losses and you look at the cost of borrowing and the cost of where government is. I mean, how do you come to the conclusion that there can be anything other than some form of sacrifice across society? There's going to need to be money poured into economic resilience and economic diversification. That's what Tiff Macklem essentially said. That's what all the major banks are essentially saying, that it's going to take fiscal policy to do this. But that means other things are going to get squeezed out. I mean, the math is the math, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think that's kind of the point that the Prime Minister has been making from the jump, right? That we were going to be seeing through uncertain economic times. And, you know, his national address last week sort of laid that out in terms of sacrifices needing to be made. And so I don't think Canadians are, like, I think we're prepped for a so-called austerity budget, or however you want to qualify it. But I think it's also interesting that if you are a government and you do have a minority mandate, right? Because even though it's a very strong minority, right, only 3 seats or whatever it is shy of a majority, they're still in a minority, and they need a dance partner to be able to pass this budget. And it strikes me as somewhat odd that it was just last Tuesday that Don Davies had said that they hadn't actually met yet. And then, you know, later in the week, the Prime Minister did meet with all of the opposition leaders. But if you're crafting a minority budget and you want one of the parties to be able to support you, I would imagine that you wouldn't craft that budget in isolation, and you would be, you know, meeting months in advance, quite regularly, with some of the opposition leaders, or a opposition leader at least, to.
As I just said, they're not meeting with anyone. It's like they don't care. Granted, they'll have Elizabeth May's vote. They have it all the time, but they still need 2 more votes. So they have to pull someone. The Bloc and the Conservatives are not going to do it. The NDP, 2 of them going to cough it up. Well, then might as well be the whole NDP party votes with the Liberals. But then they have to decide to do that. And they're not being consulted. They're not being given anything. They're not being given official party status. So why would the NDP do that? Well, they're in a bad position because they don't have a permanent leader. They don't have money. At this point, what do they have to lose? So maybe the NDP just like, oh, let's just roll the dice and go for an election. It's like 50-50 at this point that we go to an election, Christmas election. And the Liberals are doing overdrive right now, especially on CBC, CTV, trying to frame this as if any of the other parties doesn't work with the Liberals, it's their fault. It's not the Liberals' fault for proposing something awful and trying to work with the parties. It's the other way around.
Sort of see what kind of path forward you have. And that's why I think it was really smart of Don Davies yesterday to sort of flip the onus onto the government and say, well, they have to craft something that we can support at the end of the day. And I think that's, unfortunately true for the government. That's quite right. Canadians don't want an election right now. I can completely understand why some Liberals might be tempted for one. You just need 3 more seats and boom, you get a majority. But I would caution them based on that, simply because, if you look at the last election, the Conservatives lost yet again, but they made significant inroads with East Asians, South Asians, younger voters, and they have incredible message discipline, particularly when it comes to issues of affordability and crime. Liberal messaging, if we were to be plunged into an election, would presumably be we need a majority mandate. Yeah. But I don't know if that sells as good right now.
Yeah, I can't find a
That's not a really good selling point, because that's just like, give us more power, not what can you do for the people. This is surprisingly logical from this liberal advisor to Justin Trudeau, which tells us that the Liberals, how they run their ship for the past 10 years, it was all intentional. How they destroyed our country, it was intentional. Let's just jump over to CTV for a minute here. Listen how they talk about Pierre Poilievre.
Conservative Party is tied with the Liberal Party when it comes to ballot support. Pierre Poilievre personally significantly trails Mark Carney when we ask Canadians who they would prefer as prime minister. He's basically about 20 percentage points behind Mark Carney.
So he's kind of a disadvantage to his own party at this point.
Yeah, the ironic twist is that...
Yeah, this is quite something. Disadvantage to his own party. They are trying so desperately to get rid of Pierre Poilievre because he's such a threat to the Liberal Party. They'll spread this crap anywhere and everywhere.
Right now, people might not like the Liberals or be happy about the last 10 years, but they seem to like Mark Carney. And then there are other people that might not.
Yeah, that's because he gets pumped up on mainstream media as some sort of Mr. Banker hero. If they actually showed Canadians who Mark Carney really is, Canadians wouldn't vote for this guy. They saw that this guy is enriching himself, getting stinking rich off of hardworking taxpayers. They would not vote for this guy. If everyone knew how many conflicts of interest he has here, how many companies he's enriching himself, he'd be out the door immediately. Let's just see what his stocks are up here today. 31% Brookfield, 2% Brookfield, Lockheed 2%, Newmont 47, GE Vernova 56, 96. This thing keeps going to the moon. BTX Technologies, every video is like 67, 77, now it's 96%. Carney's got $1 million in there, now he's got $2 million in there. How much does he have invested? We don't know. They don't give us that kind of information.
Not be hot on Pierre Poilievre, but they like the Conservatives and they believe that it's still time for a change.
Interesting.
When they're running segments 24/7 about how Pierre Poilievre is so closely connected to Donald Trump, he's just like Donald Trump, I'm going to spend some time and compare Donald Trump to Mark Carney and show people how close those two guys actually are. Aside from their political views, they're much closer than Pierre Poilievre is to Donald Trump. It's not even close.
Well, I think this is the beauty of being a Mark Carney liberal. It is saying one thing, doing another, and saying another thing altogether entirely. You said the word evolution. I think it's just a giant flip-flop, and it is a incredible middle finger to a lot of the NDP left socialist government workers, and there's commas between those categories, by the way, that put their trust behind the prime minister and are now getting some whiplash. So I think we'll see how this turns out. I don't suspect that the voters in Ottawa and Nepean will be particularly happy with the prime minister's position on this.
Okay, I got it.
This dog and pony show is coming to an end soon. If we go to an election now, though, it's a 50-50. It's too risky. Got to get the NDP stronger before we do it again.
Is it up to the NDP? And what do you think the chances are that they're going to be the ones to say, let's go to an election?
Well, Vashti, if I have to be the first to put my marker down in the front bench betting pool as to how this is all going to unfold, I think all the opposition parties are going to scream what they're going to scream and say it's all terrible and it's awful and they can't do it. And here's all the reasons why we're right and righteous. But when it comes time for an actual vote, I think there's going to be a few conspicuous absences that'll allow them to say they voted against it, but the thing still goes through. I just actually don't see it working out for anyone and kind of forcing Canadians to go to the polls right now. And I also think the government's kind of playing a high stakes chicken, but I don't think they have the biggest risk if they are thrust back into an election period. And so I think they're going to see this saber rattling as we tend to. I think silly season, it's normal in the run up to Christmas, started early this year, probably because the budget is so late and coming here in the first week of November. But ultimately, I think this is just political games being played all around right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll be abstain and it'll just go through, because it's not the best timing for the Conservatives right now. We need a strong NDP to siphon power away from the Liberals and then go to an election. So the NDP have to have their leadership race and get their leader in place in a few months in the spring, and then we go to an election and defeat the Liberals.
Liberal who wants an election right now, no matter what, polling and other things would tell you. But, Cheryl, the math is the math, as I was saying, but Supriya points out the politics is the politics. And, you can see why Mr. Poilievre and his party wouldn't do anything to help Mark Carney and his party. Where do you see this potentially going?
The opposition parties, they don't necessarily have the polling and the numbers behind them. Yes, the voter intention, it's close between the Conservatives and the Liberals. But, in terms of who people prefer as a prime minister, there is a real massive gulf between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. Yeah. Everybody is going to, and how you frame it is if you're going to blame somebody for sending Canadians to the polls. That's why everybody's uttering the words Christmas election. They're using it as a boogeyman. They want to strike, a Sinterklaas fear into everybody about what would happen if you actually go to the polls and say, you're going to have to wear this, you're going to have to take the blame. Nobody wants to do this again. And the opposition parties will have to tell everybody in the country why we did this to you. But I do think that, to everybody else's point, there is still that messaging issue. Tomorrow Pierre Poilievre is going to have a, what's he called it?
No More Sacrifices
event for youth to directly appeal to young people in the setting himself up as, an exact foil to what Mark Carney said last week about sacrifice. When that's the message that you have to go out on, is especially to the younger people who are looking to park their vote, who may not be as, concerned about some of the things that older voters are going to be caring about. This is a government, this Liberal government is telling you specifically that your life is going to be more difficult. Your life is going to be harder. You have to sacrifice because of choices that everybody else older than you made.
Yeah, the problem with the messaging is they keep spewing this stuff on CBC, CTV, across mainstream media, and that's what the average person sees. So they see if the opposition doesn't work with Mark Carney, then it's their fault. They're at fault for this. So it's almost like they're forcing the Conservatives to abstain so this goes through. Otherwise, they get labeled as the bad guy. Unless the Conservatives are confident enough to go to election right now. I think it'll just be another stalemate. It might be one way or the other. Conservatives get minority or Liberals get minority again, but it's not going to go majority either way right now. It's amazing that everyone in Canada makes these decisions on who they're going to elect without knowing exactly who they're trying to elect. Who is Mark Carney? What are his priorities in life? It's like some sort of dirty, sinister game here. You just can't believe this is happening, but it is real life. Money and greed have corrupted our government so badly that it's nearly impossible to get a government in power to fix all the problems.
I said this to you earlier on radio, Laura, but I feel like of all the parties, the Liberals would mind the least. Yeah. If they, not to say everyone wants or anything, but they would mind the least if there happened to be an election in a month or so.
I think that's right. I think they would mind the least. But as I said earlier on radio, I don't think they want an election. I don't think anyone wants an election. When you ask yourself who benefits from an election, the answer certainly is not Canadians, not the country, not the economy.
And as for the Liberals, Mark Carney's got no deals. He's an absolute loser and a failure, and all he's doing is enriching himself. And people are finding out. So his popularity has gone down. It hasn't gone up. So it's riskier for the Liberals too. They need another boogeyman or have some other character come out of the woodworks and spook Canadians again to run on fear and anguish and voting for the Liberals again. That's all they got. They have no plan for the country. The only plan they have is to enrich their own bank accounts.
It is very much an expectations management game. Minister McKinnon is very clearly setting the stage to Sharon's point, to make sure that should things not go great here, it is very clear that a vote against the budget is a vote for an election. They want to make sure that that narrative is very hard-lined and that Canadians are not getting mixed messages about that.
Yeah, and that's been pushed out by mainstream media. That's why that doesn't give the Conservatives many options.